Hi everyone, this is Miss Susan just with a follow-up from our sink and float lesson this morning. If you didn't get to join us, I just wanted to make a little bit of what we did available to you so that you can join in on the later sessions and have a little bit of background. The sink float lesson is a pretty standard Montessori lesson, and it's part of the science curriculum, obviously. I'm actually using it as a precursor to giving a lesson on parts of the fish again, in which I will introduce the idea of a swim bladder and how fish stay afloat. I usually try to introduce this around the same time because it's very tangible. Children can see things that sink and float, and then they can understand more the concept of how air or things that are lighter than water have the density that's proper enough to make them float. Today what we did, if you weren't there, is I had a tub of water here, and I had lots of objects, and we made hypotheses about whether or not the objects would float or sink. And I would ask one, and they'd say the other. It was great. They all had some very good observations. The floating objects, just for some recap here for you, included a cork. That was a ping pong ball. The other one is actually, surprisingly, it was a bouncy ball, a little green bouncy ball. It floated. And I've got ping pong ball. Oh, that's a wooden cube that floated. And a rubber ducky, of course, and a balloon filled with air. Those floated, and you'll find that at the bottom, these are the ones that sank. You had a green glass bead, a little tiny Easter chick that was like a pom-pom. He sucked up the water, and once the density got too heavy, he sank instead of floating. And we had a rock, and this looks like, I think this was, nice drawing, Susan. Oh, I know what it is. It's a plastic shark toy. So I tried to use items that were similar in size so that they could cancel out the fact that size has everything to do with whether or not something sinks or floats, because it does not necessarily. One of our friends definitely saw immediately that there was a correlation between items that floated that were filled with air, which is true. And then what I did after we did this hands-on experiment is I just kind of very briefly explained what density is to children. And it's not the huge scientific definition that involves volume and mass and all that and the ratio between. It actually is just easy to say that the matter that makes up the water is heavier in its density than the matter that makes up a rubber duck. They are lighter and heavier. So right now that's the verbiage I'm using. Even though it's not the entire scientific definition at this age, that's what I give them. I'm going to follow this up with you guys having a take-home assignment about doing your own sink and float outdoors. It was super easy, you guys. You just need a bin like this, and you don't even need the board. I just did that for teaching's sake. But you're going to want to have your bin ready, and then invite your child to go outside with you and choose. I said 5 objects that he or she thinks will float and 5 objects that he or she thinks will sink. Just do as many as you think you can get your hands on and they make sense. And try not to guide them too much, because sometimes their discoveries that they make, their happy little accidents, are what teach them the most. I always encourage them not to pick from live things, so that's your decision. But if you can find a flower that's on the ground, that's a great one. Everything needs to be from nature. So blades of grass, mulch, rocks, anything. And what I really would love is to see pictures and hear a little bit about your experiments, and especially to see you hypothesize with your child about whether or not he or she thinks each item will sink or float. So I'm going to be sending you some stuff about that and some other follow-up things very shortly. And then I'm following this up with another lesson on buoyancy. And after that, we'll talk more about the swim bladder in a fish and why it helps fish to rise and fall beneath and below the water. And we also will be studying, I can't tell you that one, it's a secret actually, but we will be making, with me at least, a density liquid bottle that explains the idea of liquid density to children and viscosity as well. So that was kind of just the precursor, the very standard Montessori presentation. I love doing it in person, but hey, it was really fun to see all their faces on video too. So please let me know if I can help you with anything, and be looking for follow-ups from that very shortly. Have a good day, you guys.